Good afternoon to everyone. Marahay na hapon po sa Tuya Gabos. May we acknowledge the presence of Dr. Ramona Isabel S. Ramirez, one of the project leader of Lakaw Cacao. Good afternoon, ma'am. And to our participants, marahay na hapon po. Once again, marahay na hapon po sa Tuya Agabos. Sa mga participants po na hindi pa nakakapag-attendance, you may check the attendance form na nakapin po sa ating chat box at ganun din po sa ating Facebook Live. Nasa comment section po, doon po ninyo makikita yung attendance form or attendance sheet via a true Google form sa mga hindi pa po nakakapag-attendance. Once again, good afternoon to everyone. Take care of health. Once again, good afternoon. We would like as well to acknowledge the presence of our campus administrator, Zerzus M. Lusitano. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Once again, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome back to our second part of our webinar. For the overview of this afternoon session, we are going to have an online synchronous lecture from one of our invited speakers. He will be discussing the good agricultural practices and silviculture in cacao production. But during his talk, if you have clarification, you may type it in the chat box. Then after his lecture, we're going to have an open forum for your concerns. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our speaker today. He is the campus administrator of Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, Pile Campus, a professor too of the same institution, an expert in cacao production and research endeavors. Everyone, let us give a virtual applause to Dr. Celerino Liesol. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon to the campus administrator of Calabanga, of Sipopor, to the director, Mr. Janine, and to the stakeholders, the participants today. Thanks so much for coming. And I hope this undertaking will substantiate your knowledge and will learn and unlearn your knowledge and skills in cacao production. My topic today is about the good agricultural practices as well as the silvicultural management for cacao production. When we speak of good agricultural practices, we are referring to the standards and we are referring to the process in which the crops are produced from nursery up to the table, and which it follows the cleaner production process. I'm asking to let our co-host share my presentation because I have prepared with you screen presentation. Please enable your screen for me to prepare for presentation. May I ask the
Good afternoon, Sir Lisol. You may now share your screen po. Thank you, sir.
okay. Okay, thank you so much. I hope everybody see my screen. Okay, the topic for me is about good agricultural practices for cacao production and silviculture management. So as I have said, I have to define first what a good agriculture practice means. So it is a certification system for agriculture specifying procedures and the attendant document that must be implemented to create food for consumers for the processing that is safe and wholesome using sustainable methods. There are some numerous competing definition of what agriculture practices constitute, but the purpose of which is to come up with a cleaner production which will make our consumers ensure of its safe and its healthy condition. So we have another definition. According to Food Agricultural Organization, FAO, good agriculture practices is a collection of principles to apply for an on-farm production, post-production processes, resulting in safe and healthy food and non-food agricultural products, while taking into account economic, social, and environmental sustainability. So if we adhere to this principle, then we are practicing good agricultural practices. So my lecture today is about the good agricultural practices for cacao production, which commences from choosing the site, choosing the right soils, choosing the right variety, and choosing the right processes involved in plantation, its specification, as well as other attributes of environment, which will ensure the production of high quality cacao products. Okay. So the first step in cacao production is, of course, it starts with propagation technique of cacao. So you know very well that cacao is being produced in so many ways. It starts from obtaining the materials for planting. Same with other crops. Cacao may be propagated sexually or by the use of seeds, and asexually by vegetative or artificial method. Such material may come into the form of seeds or wildlings that may be gathered from the forest and existing plantations. So, cacao may be propagated in terms of tissue culture. Plantlets provide other forms of planting materials. So such planting materials can be obtained and raised in the laboratory or in the nursery. But wildlings may be rehabilitated in the growth chamber before field planting. So ang pagkakaiba ng dalawa, yung isa ay nag-originate sa seeds, yung isa nag-originate sa mga plant materials, and yung isa nag-originate sa wild areas na hindi natin i-propagate. So either of the three can be used for plantation. So propagating cacao by sexual method can be obtained from other plants when the cacao seeds matured or pods matured. So how do we know that cacao is already matured? When it is already shiny, it turned into color yellow, and the pods are shiny, and the seeds are detached to the peduncle or detached to the rachis of the seeds. So paano natin malalaman na ito ay matured na, no? O ito hinog na? Ang tunog niya ay pinupokpok natin para bagang tunog ng plywood, ano? So pag mayroon ng halo ang patanog, ibig sabihin hinog na yan. Hence yung color niya ay kulay ng yellow, hindi na kulay red or kulay green or kulay gray. There are some points to be considered in propagating cacao seeds. Now, one, we said that seeds in the nursery bed should be sown in the nursery bed or in a polyethylene containers, covered with a thin layers or of soils or soil particles, and then water daily. Watering should be done carefully using a fine rose can or sprinklers. When germinated, seedlings should attain at a higher 3 centimeter before they can be carefully transplanted into soil-filled boxes or polyethylene tubes. So ang mga seeds natin ay ipinaplant muna natin sa seed bed para mag-germinate. And if it already germinated, it could be transferred into polyethylene bags or tubes or boxes for its nourishment. After 2 to 3 months, good size of transplant can be obtained. So seedlings for field planting must not be over 1 year old when planted in the field. So pag ang seedlings 2 to 3 months na, ibig sabihin, pwede na natin i-transplant sa field. Pwede na tayo magtanim. Ang sabi dito, hindi tayo pwedeng minsan iniiwasan natin ang mga seedlings natin ay mag-overgrow ng 1 year old. Kasi mataas na yun. Ang hirap na nating bunutin at saka itanim pag dalahin natin sa field, mai-stress na ang ating mga pananim. Pag 1 year old na, ibig sabihin, kasing taas na yan ng tao. Ano? So mahirap na, hindi na yan seedling, kundi sapling na yon. Sapling stage na. Kumbaga sa ano nagdadalaga na yan. So using a wildling as a planting materials can also be done. Ang mga wildlings, ito yung mga tumubo sa forest land na dala ng ating mga tubig, dala ng ating mga wild animals, o kaya nahulog sa mga trees ng existing plantation. Kaya sa tinatawag na wildlings kasi it grown from the wilderness. Hindi siya itinanim ng tao. And this can be collected and used for raising plantation materials. Wildlings collected from the forest should be rehabilitated in the growth chamber. So, pag nakakita tayo ng wildlings, hindi natin automatically tinatanim yan. Ano? Kailangan muna natin siyang i-rehabilitate sa ating mga growth chamber. Ang growth chamber, para yung flats na mayroong cover na plastic to prevent from intense sunlight and of course, evapotranspiration of the moisture. Para bagang kung sa COVID, yun ay ating refuge, yung ating quarantine areas sa mga apektado ng COVID. O kung ito ay wildlings, ang tawag natin niya is growth chamber. So young cluster of cacao wildlings can be scoped using spade and taken into the nursery for individual pricking into polyethylene bags. Ano ibig sabihin ng pricking? Selection and placed in the growth chamber for rehabilitation. So lahat ng mga nakolekta natin ng wildlings, dinadala natin sa shaded area in order for them to rehabilitate. Ikina-quarantine natin for several days, let's say usually mga 15 days, so that they could recover from stress. Parang nasa intensive care unit ang tawag natin dito sa growth chamber. So care should be taken to avoid disturbing impacts of small wildlings which resemble a mass of grass in the field. Pag kasi ang mga wildlings natin, for example, yung mga seeds natin, o yung pads natin ay naiwanan sa forest, hindi natin nakuha, yan ay magsasarili yan, magtuturubo. And then, kumpol-kumpol yan. Pag siya kumpol-kumpol, ibig sabihin, nakaklam siya, pwede natin siyang kunin in a group. And then, wag na muna natin galawin. Dali na natin sa nursery para doon na tayo maggagawa ng pricking activity or selection. And the individual plants will be placed in the polyethylene bags on the size which is appropriate for the seedlings. Sabi dito, small wildlings of cacao that are pricked should be kept under shady generally established well. This method can raise many planting materials. Once in the nursery and under shade, watering can be done regularly using fine-hole sprinklers. So mas madali na natin alagaan kaysa doon sa wilderness. Okay? So next slide, propagation by asexual method. Yung propagation by asexual method is now types of propagation which is not advisable for commercial scale. Okay. This method of propagation uses part of the mother tree, such as the use of shoots and the rootstock for grafting. Pero hindi ito kasing effective ng seeds or tissue culture. Ano? Mahirap itong grafting. Ano? Imagine, mag-graft ka, maghahanap ka ng maraming scions, and you are planting thousands of plants. At saka mag-graft ka isa-isa, nako, aabutin ka ng siyam-siyam. So hindi natin ina-advise itong method na to. Pero sa mga instances na wala talagang seeds na na available, and seeds can be very high cost in terms of production, kasi mas demand natin yung mga tableya, ginagamit natin ang asexual method. Kasi mas mahal yung gagawing tsokolate yung seeds kaysa gagawing seedlings. So laging mayroon tayong economic consideration in choosing the right kind of propagation techniques or methods we are going to use for cacao. Then another asexual method is the use of tissue culture. Akala natin ang plants na cacao ay naigrow lang natin by means of seeds or by means of shoots or rootstock grafting. Pero with the advent of sophisticated technology, cacao can now be raised using the tissue culture method. So under this method, selected tissue of desired cacao species are cultured in the laboratory and allowed to regenerate into minute plantlets. Nasa test tube ito, kung baga sa test tube baby ito. And ginagawa natin ito for massive propagation. However, many plant cells could be produced in one step, kaya lang very costly. The cost of tissue culture for cacao was not very promising because it entails so much cost and maintenance. And napakaano pa ng technology natin sa tissue culture. Mas maganda pa yung seeds na lang. Kasi mas ensure tayo na ang seeds ay mag-grow kaysa dito sa tissue culture. Napaka-sensitive ng prosesong ito. And still, the most effective method for propagating cacao is by the use of seeds or by sexual propagation method. Kaya seeds pa rin ang pinaka-common at saka pinaka-most economical method of propagation. Then another steps involved in establishing cacao plantation is the raising of cacao planting materials. And those we have discussed before a while ago are all process of producing planting materials. And this process involves consideration of the purpose of raising cacao. Sometimes it gives us a best answer as to whether or not you need to establish nursery or you just buy planting materials. Saan tayo makaka-economical? Saan tayo makaka-economize? Whether or not we will establish nursery for a plantation or we will just buy planting materials ready to plant. So if you intend to raise more planting materials, because it would be costly to buy planting materials from the private nursery kasi ang range ng seedlings natin, it ranges from 100 to 150. Imagine kung 1,000 ang tatanim natin, 100,000 ang kailangan natin para sa isang plantation. Whereas kung mag-produce ka ng seeds, you buy 3 kilos of seeds which will cost you 240 pesos and you can raise so many plants. O, mas economical, gagawa na lang tayo ng planting materials through production in the nursery. So in establishing nursery, kailangan natin ng climate consideration, availability of fertile soil, availability of water, availability of labors, and the location of our nursery. and of course the associated cost. I will not tackle so much on this item because your next speaker tomorrow will giving you substantial lecture on how to establish nursery. But I am just telling you that in establishing nursery, you have to consider so many things before you can have an effective and efficient planting materials. Now, what are the cultural management that you need to consider in under nursery condition? One is that cleaning, weeding, fertilizer application, watering, and pest disease control. So these are the most important cultural management under nursery condition. Lagi nating isa sa alang-alang ang kalinisan ng ating mga areas by removing waste, plant debris, and leaving plants alone. Weeding is the removal of undesirable plants or vegetation. Inalis natin yung mga hindi kailangan. Bakit? Kasi it competes the nutrients of your desired plants. Now, fertilization is not much a big deal in nursery production under good agriculture practices. Why? Because we are preventing the use of chemical fertilizers, but organic fertilization in order to adhere to the standard of our good agriculture practices. Kapag fully organic fertilizer, pasok tayo doon sa criteria ng ating standards. Ano? So watering is a very important component that should consider in the nursery. Then pest and diseases control is the eradication of diseases that appear in your seedlings. Now, the second step, tapos na tayo sa pag-produce ng mga planting materials, pag-identify ng ating nursery, Now, let's go to the establishing of cacao plantation. What are the procedures in establishing plantation? Kailangan natin ang selection of the site. So, selection of the site for various species of cacao is very important in order to enhance management, field operation, and health growth. So, basic is the concept that when you select the site, it should be one which has fertile soils. Pag sinabing mga fertile soils, ano ang ini-implies nito? Hindi na natin kailangan mag-fertilize. And we can produce a good quality of products. And it should not be prone to grazing and fire. The planting site must not be prone to this kind of tragedy, such as grazing. Baka yung cacao nyo, kakainin lang ng mga roaming animal. And dapat hindi siya susceptible sa fire. Kasi iiyak kayo. Pag ang plantation nyo ay inatake ng ganitong mga pests, grazing animal, and forest fire. These are events which will left the farmer in the misery of crying because of losses. Then another is in selecting your planting site, subject to the local climate conditions and irrigation facilities to ensure adequate water supply. Sometimes we missed the condition because as if climate conditions do not have bearing in your site selection. In Bicol region, climate is a very disastrous element. These are sources of our risks and disasters. So, kailangan natin i-consider ang climatic conditions. In Davao City, in Davao region, in Mindanao, where typhoons are seldom visiting, climate conditions is not much of big deal. But in Bicol region, you know, in other places where typhoon are frequently on the hot spot, climate must be considered. But at any rate, climate change, climate adaptation can be made by the use of different alternative measures, such as the use of planting calendar, the use of delay planting, and the use of daily harvesting. So preferred vegetation cover is also one consideration. Ang mga kakao kasi, hindi siya masyadong tumutubo for 100% open areas. Kailangan niya ang 50% shade on the initial year. And pag namunga na siya and they are already established, we reduce the canopy by 25%. So that the shading will now only be 25%. Kasi yung mga kakao may sarili ng shading. Ano? And paano natin ginagawa ang ganito? Nag-introduce tayo ng mga superior plant or premium plants na may mataas ang canopy. And ang pinipreferred in Davao ay yung saging. Ano? Saging o yung mga banana, fruiting banana such as yung Cavendish, yung Kalibo, ano, lahat siya ay mga plantain, ano, which will serve as shade for initial cacao plantation. So the planting area should be selected in the marketed area, preferably 2 to 3 months prior to the onset of rainfall. So dapat daw, itong mga consideration na ito, nagawa na natin 2 to 3 months bago lumabas o bago mag-umpisa ang rainy days para prepared tayo ng pagtatanim. Usually nagtatanim tayo pag nag-onset na ang rainy days. Why? Ano ang logic nito? Hindi natin kailangan na mag-supply ng tubig. Hindi na tayo mag-water kasi mayroon ng natural source of water from the rain. Okay. Mahirap magtanim, mahirap mag-water sa mga hilllands, malayo sa ating sources. Then another, if you prefer, if you select for a plantation site, sabi dito, the site is approximately level or only enough fall. Moderate slope, hindi naman sobrang napakataas, napaka-steep to assure easily drainage. So ganyan ang pinaka-ideal site ay yung medyo barabakilid na lupa or mga sloping areas na hindi naman aabot sa 100%. Ano? So moderate lang ang slope para ang purpose nito yung drainage ng mga water when the rainfall comes in. So kailangan natin ma-drain lagi ang slope. Ayaw ng plants na ayaw ng kakao na masyadong matubig. Kaya ayaw din niya ng sobrang dry. So kaya pinipili natin yung moderate ang slope. Para kung sumobra man yung ulan, hindi siya babahain. O kung kumulang man, hindi naman siya bababa. Kasi naka-store doon sa canopy yung mga water. Ano? Then, another. You also provide sites. If the site is well forested, may forest lang tayo, and therefore protected from the breeze, the plantation may be carried very near to the sea coast. Sabi dito, pwede man daw tayo sa mga baybayin, sa mga malalapit sa ating mga dagat, kung ang area ay protected ng forests. And then, mayroon tayong mga vegetation which will prevent, kasi kung yan ay mga forest land, nasa elevated portion yan. So ibig sabihin, hindi siya pwedeng pasukin ng mga tide waters. Hindi siya pwedeng anuhin ng daluyong. No? Hindi siya ng tides. Oh. And hindi siya papasukin ng mga salty water na nagiging dahilan sa pagkamatay ng mga plants. So yan ang ating mga consideration. So hindi naman sinasabi natin na ang cacao ay hindi pwede sa mga beach, sa mga Ang sabi lang dito, dapat yung mga plants, yung mga sites na yan ay hindi aabutin ng daluyong or water tide. At saka, hindi siya babahain pag naglalim ang tubig. And dapat siya nasa elevated portion. Okay. Now, ano naman ang tipo ng lupa na kailangan ng mga cacao? Sabi dito, cacao is suitable to soil with very wide range of silt, clay, and loam soil. So, which will have a good drainage. Hindi naman natin sinasabi na ang sabi lang naman dito, soils na mayroong drainage. Kaya, pag sinabi natin clay, ang hirap yata ng clay. Bakit? Wala siyang magandang water holding capacity kasi pagbaha ay pag tag-ulan, ang clay bumabaha. Pero pag wala naman tubig, ito ay nagiging adobe. Matigas. Kaya, kailangan natin yung combination ng tatlo. Silt, sand, clay para ma-retain natin ang water holding capacity at saka yung drainage ng ating mga pananim. Okay? So, sabi dito, hindi naman natin ino-objectan yung pagkakaroon ng plantation sa mga rocky soil, sa mga may mga bato, Hindi naman ito rigid na kailangan ay ganyan. Kailangan clay, kailangan loam. Yung mga rocky soils, in fact, such land have an advantage in promoting good drainage. Why? Kasi yung mga rocky areas na yan ay mayroon siyang sites which percolation ng tubig could be drained. May mga rocky areas na yan. Magandang drainage ang rocky areas. Hindi bumabaha. Pero ang ayaw lang ng mga cacao ay yung adobe. Yung madrigal soils na hinahakot ng mga truck na dinadump sa mga low-lying areas in order for dump. Yung mga madrigal soils na nanggagaling din sa pikwarya na dinadala natin sa mga daanan, sa mga binabahang lugar para mag-fill up ng mga lupa, adobe yun, madrigal sand yun. Pag yan ay walang tubig, matatagas yun. Pag siya naman ng tubig, ay naman siya, madulas. Kaya hindi siya pwede sa cacao. Then generally, kung soil ang pag-uusapan, soil should be fertile and easy to till and cultivate. Yan naman kaya natin ayaw ang adobe kasi pag ako-cultivate niya, masisira ang ating mga tools, masisira ang ating mga makinarya. So sabi nito, the types of soil should be fertile and easy to till and cultivate. Madaling hawanan, madaling iararo, or madaling tamnan. Okay. So, it is necessary para sa pag-prepare natin ng site para maano natin yung mga kinds of site, it is necessary to cut and remove all underbrush together with some trees other than those designated for shade. Kailangan natin mag-clear ng area. Ano ang kini-clear natin dito? Yung mga understories, yung mga suppressed, at saka mga shrubs. Hindi natin kailangan yon. Wala naman produkto tayo sa mga shrubs na yan. So we are desiring a cacao plantation. So kaya i-remove natin yun. Pero hindi naman natin sinasabi na lahat aalisin yun kasi kailangan natin ng mga vegetation. Yung mga plants na may canopy na makakapag-protect sa lupa pag tinanim na natin yung ating mga cacao. So, kailangan natin ng vegetation para, sabi nga natin, at least 50% vegetation. Kaya yung mga medyo matataas, ngayon, kung wala naman talagang trees, ano yung na-identify natin na site, mag-introduce tayo ng mga vegetation such as yung yung mga leguminous, yung mga plantain, So, clearing the land, siya nga pala. Alin ang mga puputulin natin ng mga trees? Sabi dito, if such shade trees are left, only those of the pulse or beans or leguminous family are recommended. Ang iiwan lang daw natin yung mga trees na mayroong property ng beans at saka family legumes, leguminaceae. Why? Kasi ito yung nagpo-produce ng mga nitrogens that when leaves falls, when the leaves fall, nagiging fertilizer. Mayaman ito kasi ang mga legumes sa nitrogen. So yun ang mga hindi natin aalisin ng mga pananim. Ano mga alisin natin ng mga underbrush? Yung mga talahib, yung mga species na belong to Gramineae family. Why? Kasi yun ang mga plants na nagdi-deplete ng nutrients sa lupa. So kaya aalisin natin. Ang i-retain natin yung mga legumes kasi nagsaserve siya as a source of fertilizer. Baga. Now, clearing the land should be done during the dry season. Alam naman natin siguro kung anong ibig sabihin nito. Because all the refuse, debris should be sometimes burned or buried in the site. Yun yung sinasawag natin na prescribed burning. Thereby conserving the soil, the potash salts, which are so essential to the continued well-being of the plants. Kasi pag may mga ashes tayo, component niya, maraming potassium. Okay. So this is what we call prescribed burning. Hindi naman natin pero as one of the good agricultural practices, ginagawa natin ng compost. It's just a case to case. Hindi naman natin to ginagawa every day or every time. Kumbaga sa just once in a year. Okay. The land should be deeply plowed. Yan ang pinakamagandang characteristics ng preparation. The land should be deeply plowed and if possible, subsoiled. Ano ang deep ng cultivation natin sa cacao? It should be 60 centimeters. It should be gatuhod. Kasi yun ang property ng soil na mayroong sulum or horizon A, horizon B. So these are the important things why we should have to deeply plow our land. Pending the time of planting the orchard, bago mag-plantation ng ating cacao, kasi pinag-prepare na natin, pwede pa tayong magtanim ng mga legumes or beans or some forage plant na pwede natin magamit or kahit nandyan na yan, pwede nating tamnanan ng cacao. Halimbawa, may mga tanim tayo ng sitaw, may tanim tayo ng mga okra, mga forage plants na yan. Pwede na tayo magtanim ng cacao. Hindi naman siya makakahadlang. Konting space lang naman ang kailangan ng ating cacao sa mga plantation na yan. And mas gusto nga nila na mayroong mga nutrients sa supplementing elements para ma-retain ang soil characteristics, yung soil fertility. Kasi mga legumes yan. Okay. Now, another thing is, sabi dito, kailangan daw natin yung mga hood crops. Anong ibig sabihin? Yung mga crops na pwede natin i-cultivate by means of low technology, such as yung hoe, and which will make an open field as well as to destroy all wages. Yung mga pwede nating hawanin lang, gawin natin yung pwede nating hawanin lang ng mga crops, gaya ng mga vegetable crops in the area. Habang hindi pa tayo nagtatanim ng cacao. Then another important thing that you should have to consider, ito, minsan nakakalimutan natin ito. May plantation tayo pero binabaha kasi wala tayong drainage. Pati ang mga ano natin, anong problema natin? Ba't tayo binabaha sa ating mga subdivision? Kasi walang drainage. So drainage is not only true sa mga urban areas, sa ating mga housing. It is also needed in our plantation. And the number and size of drainage will depend upon the amount of rainfall. Yung intensity ng rainfall, yung contour ng land, kung ito ay mataas o mababa, and the characteristics of soil, absorbent capacity. No. So kung ang sa soils natin ay medyo sandy, sandy loam, ang drainage natin ay masyadong moderately needed. Why? Because the soil itself has the capacity to drain. Pero kung ang soils natin is clay loam, kailangan natin ng drainage. Why? Kasi mayroon siyang abrupt water stress, abrupt during the rainy season. Okay? Kaya kailangan natin ng drainage. Anong sabi dito? In no case, construction of ditches or yung ditches natin yun ng drainage, will be less than 1 meter. Hindi daw pwede tayo maggawa ng ditches or drainage na mas mababa sa 1 meter ang kanyang lalim. Mas mababa sa 1 meter ang kanyang wide. At saka 60 meter ang depth. Anong 60 meter? Sa layman's term. 60.
Wala gid siya lang.
Good afternoon, sir. Dr. Liesol, excuse me po. Sir, nakamute po ata kayo.
Okay, sige, okay.
Okay na po, sir. Thank you po.
Naririnig na ako? Okay.
Yes,
sige.
sir. Yes po.
Okay, nandun tayo sa drainage. Ang ibig sabihin, kailangan natin mag-establish ng drainage. Ang sabi ko doon, dapat ang drainage daw hindi bababa ang size na ang wide niya sa 1 meter. Ganyan. Parang ang 1 meter. And then, ang lalim niya, katuhod or 60 centimeter. Now, let's look at the plantation. The plantation should be carefully lined out in one direction. Dapat daw mayroong direction ng ating plantation. Kaya kung yan ay perfectly measured, mayroon tayong direction ng plantation natin. Usually ang direction natin ay north-south direction. Anong reason natin? Para magkaroon tayo ng equal distribution ng light. Why? Kasi yung east and west, yan ang direction kung saan tumataas, bumababa, o nagsa-sunrise, nagsa-sundown ang ating sun. So kung ganyan, mayroon tayong unequal distribution of light. Kaya in-arrange natin ang row natin from north to south direction. So maintindihan natin yan kung tayo ay mag-establish. Kunin nyo nila akong mentor pag-establish ng plantation, and I could go with you sa field. Kasi mahirap ngayon din natin ma-illustrate dito ngayon kasi kung tayo Now, Yung ano naman, yung sa pag-establish ng plantation, sabi dito, there should be planted, there should be a row in between plants. Ano, dapat daw yung ating mga cacao, mayroong intercrop na shaded shelter plant. Ano ang mga shelter plant natin? Ano? Usually, ang ginagamit ng shelter plant natin yung banana, yung mga banana, ano. Pero sa atin, sa Bicol region, pwede rin sa atin yung abaca, ano, kasi mayaman ang Bicol region sa mga Bisaya sa abaca. Sa Davao kasi, ang cacao ay in-intercrop nila ay mga Cavendish, yung mga batag. Ano, kaya yung mga batag na nanggagaling sa Davao, galing yan sa cacao plantation. So sa atin, if ever we want to have intercrop, sa atin usually nyug, coconut, at saka yung ating mga mahogany plantation or yung ating mga mahogany and yung ating mga dipterocarps. Okay. Now, paano natin itatanim yung intercrop? Sabi dito, sa gitna, kaya in Queens-Cox order, intersecting point of two lines. So, kung yan ay kwadrado, alimbawa sa kwadrado, dito sa gitna natin itatanim yung ating mga banana. So, minsan, alin ang nauuna? Saging o cacao? Depende kung which one is already available. Ano? Hindi naman sila nag-uunahan. Ang importante, at the end of the day, they will be grown simultaneously in the end. Okay. Kasi yung mga shelter na yan is only temporary. Temporary lang naman yan. Yung mga saging natin, pinuputol natin yan pag namunga na. Ano? Pero yung cacao, it shows a permanent crop which will not be cut until it is already dry and dead. Hindi natin pinuputol ang mga except kung ang mga cacao natin ay mayroong diseases. Ano? So this temporary shelter is indispensable for the protection of the young plantation from wind and from sun. So, okay. So sabi dito, in some part of the country, the planting of sucker of fruiting bananas are widely adopted. But throughout the Visayas and Southern Luzon, especially in Bicol region, abaca could be advantageously substituted. Kasi mayaman tayo sa abaca. So this temporary shade may be maintained until the 4th to 5th year. So kailan lang natin ito? Kasi ang mga banana is biennial crops yan. So pag namunga na ang cacao, it's already time na pwede na natin alisin ang ating mga shade trees. Papalitan na natin ng ibang plants. Ano ang sinasubstitute natin? Yung kakawate, yung mga legumes, sisbanya, in other form of nutrient supplementing plants. Usually yung ating kakawate, ang ginagamit natin ng panghalili sa mga plants na yan. Then the next practice for a good agriculture practices is the choose of variety. So sa Pilipinas, mayroon tayong 4 na variety. Pero ang most common na ginagamit natin, may resembles na native ay yung Criollo. May 3 tayong variety, Criollo, Forastero, Calabasillo, or yung combination na Trinitario. Ang pinaka-common na ginagamit natin sa Bicol region ay Criollo. May ano kasi ito, may touch ng native. And yung ano nito ay very delicious. Ito ang nagimataan pang siram na tsokolate, yung Criollo. Pero ito maliliit, kaya lang ito naman ang masarap. Kung ang mga Pilipino maliliit, talagang maliliit talaga ang Pilipino, pero sa atin masarap 'yon. Itong mga Trinitario at saka yung Brazilian hybrid, ang lalaki niya pero hindi masarap. Ano? So ang mga sa Pilipino, kahit maliit, masarap. Pero yung mga sa foreign na mga variety, malalaki pero hindi masarap. Ano? Yun ang ano natin dyan. Kaya masyado natin pinipili yung mga native na mga variety ng cacao. Dahil masarap. Aside from seed characters already given, forastero is recognized. Ito kasing forastero, mas malaki-laki ito. Ano? And then, ang ano niya, ang planting niya ay nagbavari. Kung siya ay gamitin natin na Criollo, so ngayon, arag-arag kayo na ano ka. Ano ang gusto natin? Masarap o malaki? Anong gusto natin? Mabigat o small, pero mas masarap? Depende po sa choice natin at saka kung ano ang demand sa market. Di ba? Wala naman ditong big deal sa variety. Ano, ang importante lang namin sa variety kung alin dito ang mabenta at alin dito ang gusto ng ating mga kumakain ng tsokolate. Okay. So yung third variety natin is Trinitario. Ito yung combination ng dalawa. Pinag-hybrid itong dalawa na to. Yung characteristics ng Criollo na masarap at saka yung characteristics ng Forastero na malaki, mas mabigat kasi kung timbang ang pag-usapan, nakuha ng variety ng Trinitario. Pinaghalo ang characteristics ng dalawa. So ngayon, kung ikaw ay optimistic, kung ikaw ay gusto magtanim ng gusto mo ng parehong quality, piliin mo yung Trinitario, di ba? Pero, sabi dito, the most preferred variety in Bicol region is Criollo because it resembles native taste among Bicolano. Ayaw nila yung mga Brazilian hybrid kasi maasim, hindi matamis, hindi masarap. Pero siguro sa orientation ng ating mga dila, ano, kung ano ang gusto ng ating dila, kung ano ang gusto ng ating panlasa, doon tayo. No? Kasi after all, yung satisfaction natin doon sa sarap, hindi doon sa size. Ano? Okay? Naiintindihan po ng ating mga nakikinig. Kung alin ang masarap, doon tayo. Hindi yun sa laki. Ano? Transport of planting stock. Another consideration. Ano ang mga practices natin in planting stock, in transporting of your planting stock? Number 1, bago daw natin i-outplant ang ating mga itatanim na cacao sa nursery, kailangan natin i-expose ito sa condition in the field. Inaalis natin ang mga ring-ring, inaalis natin ang mga mulch, inaalis natin yung mga takip. Ini-expose nila. Para bagay itong yung bata na galing sa ating nursery, pinapainit-initan muna natin para at the end, pag sila ay pwede nang iwanan sa field, hindi na sila mabibigla. Gradual. It's hardening the plant by gradually exposing the planting materials to the site. The number 2, sabi dito, load and unload the potted seedling or wildling carefully. Minsan, kapot-kapot tayo doon sa sa crown. Lanog na itong mga shoots. Kinakaputan tayo doon sa stem. Dapat ang mga plants kinakapot na tayo doon sa pots, doon sa may lupa, hindi doon sa dulo ng ng shoots. Kaya nalalanog tayo itong mga. So carefully to avoid damage, especially to the roots. Minsan ibinabaradak ta lang doon sa trap. Minsan kinakaputan tayo sa taas, napuputol. So if possible, plant the propagules immediately after transporting them to the site. So yan, isa pa. Minsan i-transport na natin, gaya yung mga binibigay sa DA, transport na natin sa field. But because walang nagtanim, 6 months na, nandoon pa yung ating mga pananim sa site. Kaya ang nangyari, namatay. Kasi hindi naman na itanim. So sabi nito, if possible, plant the propagules immediately after transporting them to the site. Yan ang rigid rule. Hindi yung dinala na ng DA, dinala na sa ating site, tapos iniwanan lang doon sa gilid ng mga saging, iniwan lang doon sa mga gilid ng mga kapok, tapos minsan doon sa gilid ng ng mga abaka. Kaya ngayon sira. So, dapat itanim ka agad natin. So, schedule natin. Pag hindi kayo magtatanim, huwag mo lang i-transport. Yan ang logic dyan. Ano? Next, planting. Ito ang mga rules natin for planting cacao. Planting cacao implantation can be done with the use of seedling and wildling raised from the nursery. So, either of the two or either of the three. Planting of nursery raised should be done by loosening the soil in the prepared hole. Cut and carefully remove the plastic bag. Ang iba, tinatanim pa natin pati bag. Alisin natin ang plastic bag. Kasi, paano magpipenetrate doon yung ating mga moisture, yung soils, kung nakabag siya. Hindi siya lalaki kaagad. Okay? Then, para ma-liberate natin ng roots. Usually kasi yung mga nakabags, nakapulupot ang mga roots doon. Paano makaka-penetrate yung mga roots kaagad natin na maghanap ng kanilang sariling tubig kung yan ay nakabags? Ano? Then, 3. Place the propagule vertically in the planting hole with the soils intact. So mamaya titingnan natin sa drawing kung paano natin yan. Then cover the planting stock with pulverized topsoil, compost or organic matter. Ibig sabihin, yung ikinalot natin, pwede hindi na natin ibalik yon sa topsoil kasi wala nang nutrients yun sa ilalim noon. Kailangan natin lagyan ng compost. Then gently compress the soil around the newly planted plants. And water and mulch the plant when necessary. Dapat makatanim natin kasabay ang tubig. Para bang pinakain natin ng Jollibee, ng burger, tapos walang soft drink. Anong siram noon? Okay, kailangan may soft drink. Kailangan may liquid tayong iinumin. Sometimes, growers of cacao seed straight away from the plantation. Sabi dito, sometimes daw yung mga grower nagsusow ng cacao seeds straight away in the plantation. Ang sabi dito, this is bad things to do. Huwag niyong gagawin yan. Huwag natin isi-sell straightly doon sa plantation ang ating mga seeds. Why? Hindi naman yan mabubuhay. At saka, sabog-sabog. Wala siyang sense of artistic or aesthetic value. Saka pag ganyan ang ginawa mo, sinabog mo lang yung mga seeds, pag-harvest mo kayan, hindi ka gagawa ng matinong ismen. Wala kang ismen. Wala kang dadaanan. And usually, ang mga seeds na yan, hindi yan tutubo dahil minsan kinakain ng mga ibon. Kinakain ng mga animals. Kaya sigurado tayo kung mga seedlings na or wildling na ang itatanim natin. So, it is better to put into the plantation either young cocoa seedlings from your own nursery beds or cocoa seedlings brought from a research center. Okay? Sa mga certified na mga nursery. Para ensure ka na yung mga plants na itatanim mo ay magsusurvive in the field. Okay. A few hours before lifting the seedlings, sabi pa dito, water the soils after a few hours before lifting the soil from the nursery, the soil should be watered. Didiligan muna natin daw ang mga soil. Kaya, bakit sinasabi? Kung ito ay hindi tag-ulan. Kaya ang sinasabi natin dito, magtanim ka during rainy days para hindi ka na magtubig, para hindi ka na magdilig ng iyong fields. Then take the seedlings out of the nursery beds with a spade or hoe. Be careful not to break the roots. Yan ang mga natin. Pag pinupull out natin ng seedlings, kasi ang mga seedlings natin, nagpipenetrate ang mga roots doon sa mga soils. Minsan, yung mga top roots natin, yun ang nagpipenetrate. Pag binunot natin sa nursery, yun ang naiiwan. Napupro natin yan. Kaya minsan, yun ang causes, yun ang reason kung bakit namamatay ang ating mga tinatanim. Dahil yung main root nasira. So next, sort out the cacao seedlings. Na, sabi dito, throw away diseased plant. Itapon na natin yung mga may mga diseased na plants. Huwag na nating panghinayangan as much as possible. Ibabaon natin sa ilalim. Ano? And plants that have twisted taproots. Ano? Pag twisted ang taproots, siguradong mamamatayan. Ano? Bakit mamamatay? Twisted na nga eh. Hindi siya makaka-absorb ng magandang soil. Hindi siya makaka-penetrate doon sa soils. You can dip the roots seedling in liquid mud so that the cacao plants will take root again easily. Ano? Yan ang sinasabi natin ng mud paddling. Yung mga binubulot ng sa nursery, binabalot natin ng mga putik para yung mga roots na yan hindi ma-expose doon sa heat. And then, yung mga root hairs natin napoproteksyonan para tumubo agad. Yan ang tinatawag nating mud paddling. Binabalot natin ng mga mud ang ating mga roots. Okay. Kailan daw pwede magtanim ng kakao? Kailan daw? Anong time? Basta sinasabi dito, at the beginning of the rainy season. So, anong start ang rainy season natin? Ano ang start ng rainy season natin na matino? May, ano? Meron ng April rain, pero pang ano lang yon, pang alisngaw. So, the best way to plant at the onset of rain is May, June, July, August. O ngayon, pwede ngayon magtanim kasi ngayon ay September. Tag-ulan ngayon. So, puno tayo sa May, June, July, August. September. Then plant the young cacao tree when they are about 6 months old. Yan. So, ang nursery lifespan natin hanggang 6 months old. Hindi natin pwedeng palampasin ng more than 1 year. Kasi kung 1 year na yan, hindi na. So, look at the figure. Ano? Ganito ang pag-ano natin. Ano ang lalim niya? Ang deep niya is 60 cm. Ano? Yan ang tamang butas natin. Ano? 30 to 60 cm. Depending sa size ng ating planting materials. So yung nasa left ay ang ano natin, yun ang soils natin doon sa top. Ito naman, yung soils ng sa bottom, yun naman natin ilalagay sa unahan. So babalik ta rin natin. Ano? Kaya dalawang portion. Pag nagkalat ka mo, dalawang portion. Yung isa, yung pinakailalim, yung isa, yung pinakamataas, babalik ta rin natin. Anong logic big day? Kasi yung ano natin, yung fertility gradients natin, nasa soil horizon A, sa taas, topsoils yun. Yun ang inilagay natin sa ilalim kasi yun ang matatamaan ng root system. Okay? Mas fertile kasi yung nasa topsoil. Yung nasa ilalim naman, yun ang ibababa natin. Babalik ta rin natin. Ano? So, ganyan. So, dito na tayo sa silvicultural practices. Ano? Tapos na tayo doon sa pagtatanim. Tapos na tayo doon sa pag-ano. Ano naman ang mga silvicultural practices? Okay. Proper maintenance and protection of the plant is highly important. This involves replanting, plant protection, weeding, general tending, and sustainable harvesting of cacao. Dito natin ipapasok na yung good silvicultural practices. Kasi yung silvicultural practices include harvesting. Okay. So anong mga una natin mga silvicultural practices na pag mayroon tayong plantation? Hindi natin inaalis yung weeding at saka mulching. Ang weeding, hindi yung pagkakasal, hindi yung mayroong pare na yes, I do. Kundi yung pag-aalis ng mga unnecessary materials, pag-aalis ng mga plants doon sa ating mga plantation. In drier areas with rainfall less than 80 millimeters, it has been found that mulching around seedling encourages growth for reduced evaporation of soil water. So ang mulching naman, ito yung paglalagay ng mga object, mga plant materials, doon sa mga seedlings, doon sa mga lupa kung saan itinanim natin. Usually, ang mga nilalagay natin dito, mga leaves ng banana, kasi nandoon na yung banana natin, leaves ng mga grasses, yung mga hinawan natin, doon sa plant, sa ibabaw ng plant, doon sa may malapit sa stem, sa base ng plant. Spot weeding treats the seedling of the competing weeds. Spot weedings. Hindi naman natin wini-weeds buong area. Kasi pag i-wini-weed natin ng buong area, aabutin kayo ng hindi mo yun mauubos. Pagbalik mo, lagi ka lang paikot ng paikot, hindi mo mauubos yan. So ang i-weed lang natin yung area kung saan natin may tanim. So this should be done at a radius of 20 centimeter around the seedlings after planting. So anong 10 centimeter? Parang 1/8 of a rule of 1 meter. So kung 20, hatiin mo ng tagli-5. Kung 20, hatiin mo ng tagli-5 ang 1 meter, yun ang distansya. A weeding should be regular or necessary to avoid competition from the weeds. The soil should be loosened at least 3 times during the plantation establishment year to improve aeration. So, lagi natin pag 1 year pa lang, lagi natin i-ensure na ang ating mga soils ay na gugura o na nalulusen para mag-improve ang kanyang aeration. Kasi pag nakakompact na natin ang soils sa plantation and there will be no rain coming, mas lalo nating nagigipit ang penetration ng root system. Okay? Next, replanting. Usually, ang replanting, hindi natin kina-consider yan. Pag namatay siya, kasi wala na tayong ibang pangtanim, dahil eksakto lang ang binili natin, isa yan sa mga drawback kung bakit ang productivity natin ay hindi fixed doon sa in-expect natin na plant. Replanting is a form of maintenance activity. Para ma-maintain natin ang in-expect natin ng yield sa ating plantation, kailangan natin fill upan yung mga namamatay na plants. Not all transplanted seedlings and wildlings will survive in the new environment. Kaya, plantation should therefore be visited regularly to check on the survival of the plants and replace the seedlings and wildlings. Napaka-importante ng replacing. Replanting should be done simultaneously with the first weeding schedule. Kaya pag mag-first weeding ka na, dalhin mo na rin yung mga pangpalit mo ng mga plants na doon sa mga namatay na mga plants na tinanim mo a month ago. This is done in subsequent rain seasons when there is enough moisture until the second. Mahirap baga maghawan kung dry ang mga lupa. Mas maganda maghawan kung may mga moisture. So pagka-ulan, ang bilis nating maghawan kung may ulan. Kasi mabilis bunutin ang mga duot, ang mga weeds natin. Okay. Ito ang pinaka-importanting silviculture practices na dapat natin intindihin sa ating kakao. Hindi nakakatuwa na ang kakao natin ay lumalaki ng lumalaki, tumataas ng tumataas. Hindi yun guarantee na pag malaki ang ating plantation, hindi yun guarantee na kung mataas ang ating kakao, ay maraming bunga kang makukuha. So kailangan natin i-prune ang mga trees. Una, kasi yung mga maliliit na stem na yan, hindi yan magpuproduce ng malaking bunga. Magbubulaklak lang yan. Alisin na natin yan. Ipuprune natin siya. Usually, ipinoprune natin yung mga maliliit na sanga na hindi naman capable na mag-hold ng prutas. I-maintain lang natin ang mga trunk na mayroong straight trunk, a crown of 3 to 5 main branches. Or about 1.5 meters above the ground. Pag sobra nandyan sa taas na 1 meters yan ang cacao, hindi na advisable na mamumunga yan na mataas. Kaya pinupro natin yung pinakatuktok ng ng cacao to a height of 1.5 meter. Anong advantage nito? Pag namunga siya, mandali na natin i-harvest kasi abot kamay lang natin. Ikalawa, yung mga nagtutubo yan sa taas, hindi naman yan mamumunga ng mga cacao. Kasi ang cacao pwedeng mamunga doon sa ibaba ng stem. Sa tatandaan nyo, kung ang stem niya ay maliit, hindi siya mamumunga ng malalaking prutas. Maliliit din ang bunga niyan. Magpaparabulaklak lang siya. Kaya pinupro natin yun. Hindi natin siya pinapalaki ng pinapalaki ang ating mga cacao. Hindi naman yan for 3 purposes, kundi fruiting purposes. The more na tinatanggalan natin sila ng mga ibang plants, the more na ini-induce natin na mamunga yung mga dapat mamungang branches. Kailan natin siya puputulin? Kung dry na. It will continues to grow. It will continues to sprout. Ang cacao, may coppicing capacity. Anong ibig sabihin ng coppicing capacity? Kahit pinutol mo ang cacao, siguradong tutubo ang mga next generation ng mga branches. Yun ang reason kung bakit kailangan natin ng i-prune. Kasi yung mga old na, tsaka yung mga maliliit na mga branches, hindi naman siya nakakapag-produce ng maraming bunga. Kundi, nakakadagdag pa siya doon sa pagkonsumo ng nutrients na ating ipinafertilize. Okay? So, sometimes, during the first year, several shoots form on the trunk. Sabi dito, cut off the shoots and leave only one strongest. Sometimes, the crown forms too low down, at least 1 meter above the ground. So, i-maintain lang natin yan. So, 1 to 1.5 meters. Parang, kung ang 1.1, para mga 7 footers yan ay. Kasi 7 kasi ang kuan is 3.54. O yun, mga ganun. 3.7 feet. 7 feet siya. Choose a shoot which grows straight up and let it develop. Yung mga straight lang daw na mga stem, yung mga shoots na straight. A new crown will then form at a good height and the first crown will stop growing. So yun ang dyan. Hindi na yan mag-grow. Yan ang reason kung bakit pruning of cacao tree is very important. It will induce the production of a good quality of fruits. Okay. Ayan, tingnan natin ang picture nito. Yung young cacao tree with 2 shoots. Cut the second shoot. Alisin natin yung isa. Isa na lang paanohin natin. Then, the crown branches. Young well-grown cocoa tree. Putulin na natin yung mga crown of branches na yan. Kasi ang mga bunga naman ng cacao dito sa mga malalaking puno. Usually dito sa mga main stem. Kung may new crown ka, and the old crown, ano nang puputol na natin? Yung mga nasa taas. Okay. Yung mga the old crown dies. Pero pag naputol siya, may tutubo ulit dyan. Okay, pruning system for cacao should be one which will reduce the number of branches. O hindi garantiya na pag maraming branches, maraming bunga. Ang marami lang dyan, flower. Okay. Always cut all dead branches and young suckers. A sucker or a twig that grows upward in the trunk. Cut the sucker very close to the trunk. Okay. So mayroon tayong dalawang picture, Mayroon tayong dalawang picture. Yung right right away of cutting off a sucker. Dapat daw ubusin mo yung ano yan. Wrong way of cutting off the sucker, yung may natitira kang stem. Dapat putulin natin lahat yung stem para may yung mga epicormic branching ng mga nakakahadlang sa ating mga stems. Okay? When cocoa tree gets old, it no longer yield many pods. Ano? But you can make mini cocoa young trees again by letting 1 or 2 suckers grow low down on the trunk where they can develop their own roots. So ito nang sinasabi natin. So old cacao tree, sige na lang ang ano niya, sige na lang ang produce ng mga leaves. Pero kung siya ay ipupro natin, yung sinasabi ko sa bago, may co-piecing ability ang ating cacao. Pag pinutol natin, mag-sprout siya ng young generation, bagong henerasyon ng mga seedling. So, maglilib lang tayo ng dalawa, and then yung isa naging dalawa. Pwede na yun pang replace natin. Kesa man, doon sa old, na wala ng yield, hindi na namumunga. Okay? So, yung nakikita natin sa picture ay ang right way. Yung iniiwan natin ng dalawa. Puputulin na natin yung trunk, and then iiwan natin ng dalawang stem para mag-rejuvenate. That is co-piecing technique. Now, another practice is applying fertilizer. Sabi dito, fertilizer cost a lot of money. The grower should use fertilizer only when this will make him more money. Kung mayroon tayo, kailangan mag-fertilize lang tayo kung kailangan tayong kikita. Pero kung hindi naman, bakit ka mag-fertilize? When you have tended your cocoa trees, you have to hold the weeds, then you should apply fertilizer. Pag hindi ka naghahawan, pag hindi ka nag-weeds, huwag ka na mag-fertilize. Why? Yung ano, sayang lang ang iyong i-fertilize kung hindi ka man nag-weeding. Why? Kasi yung mga weeds, kasasama yan na mag-consume ng fertilizer na in-apply mo. Kaya dapat, bago ka mag-fertilize, kailangan mag-weeding ka na muna. Spread fertilizer around the cocoa tree. But be careful not to put any of the trunk, the branches or leaves to the cocoa tree. Otherwise, the fertilizer will burn the tree. No? Kasi, ano yun, harmful ang fertilizer sa mga leaves ng tree. Spread the fertilizer in a ring around the trunk at a distance of about 8, where most of its small roots are. Apply fertilizer twice a year and in April and September. So ngayon, dapat nag-apply na tayo ng fertilizer kung tayo ngayon. Pero, ang sabi dito, if your soil is fertile and you cannot derive an additional profit, magiging cost lang ang fertilizer. Ano? So as much as possible, you use your plant debris to be placed around your plants kasi fertilizer na yun. So, ang nakikita niyong figure na yan is a type of fertilizer application where it is proper. Spread the fertilizer around the tree at a distance of 1 meter. Hindi naman sobrang layo, hindi naman sobrang lapit. Yan ang nakikita natin. 1 meter. So, it is useless to apply fertilizer in a plantation that is not well cared for. A grower who does not prune these cocoa trees and who does not the weeds should not apply fertilizer. So, sabi ko pa lang kanina, if the plantation is not cared for properly, fertilizer do nothing except feed the trunk of the cocoa trees. Kaya ibig sabihin, bakit ka mag-fertilize doon sa napakalaking trees na hindi naman namumunga? I-weeding mo muna, i-prune mo muna, tapos linisan mo muna ang area ng mga weeds bago ka mag-fertilize. Else, pinapakain mo lang yung walang silbi mga bagay doon sa iyong plantation. Okay? And the grower loses his money. Different soil have different fertilizer needs. So how do you know? Ask the extension service how much fertilizer to use. Lalo na kung hindi natin alam. Usually, nagpe-fertilize tayo base sa recommendation ng soil analysis. So, hindi tayo expert, kaya kailangan natin magpa-analyze ng ating soils kung ano ang nararapat. Kasi, kung hindi natin ipina-analyze ang soils natin, para tayong mag-ano niyan, para tayong mag-guess lang kung ano ang i-fertilize natin. And we provide input na hindi needed. Additional cost yan sa ating mga growers, sa ating mga farmers. Okay? Then another silvicultural practices that we have to consider is yung protection from insects and pest diseases. The most dangerous insects are the following. Capsids. These insects prick the twigs and pads. Pinipili niya yung twigs at saka yung mga pads. Kung yung mga bunga, nilalabot niya yan. At the place where they can make a hole, the trees dry. The tree dries out and sap no longer circulate. So you see, pinapapangit dito ang ating mga seeds, yung ating mga beans. Dahil sinisip-sip dito yung mga nutrients na dapat nagno-nourish sa ating mga seeds. Yung mismong pads, yung mismong bunga, ang ina-atake nitong capsids dito. Young trees attacked by capsids often dies. So, paano natin i-control ang capsids? Tandaan nyo, use lindane or aldrin. Isang chemical yan, But it is advisable at where it causes the pestilence of your plantation. Then we have the borer. Borer, the larva of insects, bore holes to the trunk or branches. And you can control borer with the use of DDT and Gildrin, DDT, or Gildrin. These are chemicals. Now, the most dangerous that attack cocoa trees are the following. Another, black pod disease. This is caused by a fungus which chiefly attack the pods, and if attacked, the pods are rotting down. Then control this disease by picking off disease pods and burning them. You can prevent the disease from spreading and spraying the sun pods with copper preparations. Nabibili man yan sa ating mga suppliers. Example doon sa ating mga chemical stores na like for instance, to name you, yung GM, meron yan mga ganyan, copper preparation. Then we have swollen rot disease, swollen shoot disease. This is a very serious disease which has caused much damage in the places like in Ghana, na experience na to. You will see that the leaves are mottled. Anong ibig sabihin ng nagiging mottled? May mga iba-ibang color. Nagdi-discoloration. Sometimes, some twigs become very thick and the tree soon dies. Another is yung mealybug. Carried about by ants can transmit the diseases from one tree to another. Yung mga mealybugs na yan, yung may kulay pula, mayroong kulay itim. So the control of these diseases is by cutting down diseased trees and leaving them to wither. Remember that when a diseased tree has been discovered and cut down, all the trees circling it must be cut down also to avoid spreading of infections. So kung mayroon siyang isang plant na naatake, lahat ng mga trees na doon sa kanyang periphery ay kailangan mo rin putulin. Kaya napaka-dangerous pala nitong swollen shoot disease na to. Kasi paano kung every 5 meters, every 5 plants mayroon, kung every 5 kunin mo yung isa pang plant dito, every 5 matitira ka na lang 2 o 3 na lang na plants. logika. Ano? So kailangan natin ingatan itong mga diseases na to. At the onset of its symptom, kailangan makontrol agad natin kung pwede pa natin makontrol. Now let's go to the harvesting of buds. Malapit na tayong harvesting the buds. The tree makes the first flower after 2 years. Ang mga kakao natin, pag 2 years na namumulaklak na, pero hindi pa yon ang tunay na mga kumbaga sa mga juvenile, nagpaparamdam pa lang siya na siya ay ready nang magbunga, maggawa ng prutas. Pero it does not show that the first flower in the first 2 years will bear fruits, true fruits. But in order not to tire the tree, you should cut off the first flower. Alisin niyo ang flowers na yan. Huwag kang manginginayang. From this, you will not get no fruit. Wala kayong makukuha ang prutas dito sa mga unang flowers na yan. Kuwan pa lang yan parang signs pa lang yan na siya ay ready na. Nag-attract pa lang siya ng mga pollinators. Okay. Pero, sizzled pa ang kanyang mga flower. Hindi pa siya pwedeng maging isang prutas. Kasi, young pa ang plants. Pag 3 years na, dyan na natin makikita yung tunay na fruits sa ating cacao. So, there are 2 harvests each year. 2 beses tayo mag-harvest ng cacao pag iyon ay 3 years na. A small harvest at the beginning of the rainy season and a big harvest at the end of rainy season. So, beginning of rainy season is start mga May, May. Then, the big harvest at the end of rainy season. Kailan ang end ng rainy season? January, February. So, yan ang end ng ating rainy season. So, dyan tayo mag-harvest. So, 2 harvest ang ating every year. Do not pick all the pods at the same time. Huwag daw natin ubusin ang pagpipik ng mga pods sa isang pagkakataon in the same time. Why? Pick only pods that are ripe, whether yellow or red. Leave on the tree any pods that are not ripe, that are still a little green. Bakit hindi natin dapat harvest ang mga young? It does not give you good seeds or beans, and it does not have a good quality tablea for processing. Go through the plantation every fortnight to pick the ripe pods. Never pick the pods by pulling them off. If you do, you will spoil your tree. You should cut the stem at the pod with a machete. Huwag mo diyang pipilipitin. Minsan baga sa atin, pinipilipit natin ng bunga para mag-harvest. No, it's not. Kasi you are spoiling the tree. It should be cut by the stem with a sharp machete. Yung kutsilyo na matalas. Sharp bolo, pwede. So, ganito ang tamang pag-harvest. Cut the stem of the pod. Do not pull off the pod. Huwag mong pipilipitin. Huwag niyong panin doon. Doon dapat doon ka dapat sa stem ng pod. Huwag yung nakakabit doon sa mga bark. So, ito ang tama, Yung dito sa kabila, may tayo. Kaya minsan, ito ang nagiging binyo ng ating mga diseases pag ganyan ang ating pagkalat ng mga prutas. Okay. Next. The next practices is the processing of cocoa beans or cacao beans. The first step is processing of the cacao beans is opening the pods. Pagka-harvest natin, siguro pagkadala nyo na sa bahay, huwag nyo nang paabutin ng 1 week. Pagkadating nyo sa bahay, do not wait for more than 4 days to open the pods. Kasi may mga may mga pathogens na yan na ka-store doon. Do not wait for 4 days. Pagkadating nyo sa bahay, 1 day, 2 days, paka-rest nyo, magkape kayo, pwede nyo i-open. Open the pods by hitting them with a thick piece of wood. Mga pinupukpok, take the beans out of the pods and put them in a basket. Then carry them to the place where they are to be fermented. Do not leave the broken husk on the field. They can be used to make a compost. So, huwag niyong iiwan doon. Dalhin nyo dito sa inyong bahay kasi pwede daw maging compost. Sama sa pangan. Okay. So, yan ang mga processing of cocoa beans from the pods. Okay. Ito ganito. Yan. Seed coat, germ, kernel. Cocoa beans cut into. Yan. Diyan na natin makikita ang mga seeds ng cacao. Ang tanong dito, why cacao beans are fermented? We have seen that the cacao beans consist of seed coat, kernel, and the germ, as what you see in the picture. Cocoa beans are fermented so as to destroy the seed coat, kill the germs, and give the cocoa a good taste. Yan ang tatlong reason kung bakit natin ipiniferment. Destroy the seed coat, kill the germs. Itong nakikita nyo, hindi na to cacao pods, kundi so seeds na to, seeds na to. Seed na to ng cacao. So ang cacao, mayroong seed coat, mayroong germ, and then the kernel. Itong kernel na to, ito ang may kape. Ay, may kape. Ito ang may ito ang may tsokolate. Yung seed coat, yun ang nagko-cover sa kanya. Okay. And yung germ, yun ang shoots na tumutubo. Yung shoot na tumutubo, yun ang part. Okay. The purpose of fermenting the cacao is to destroy the seed coat, kamakapal yun, kill the germs, and give the cocoa a good taste. Ang kinikil natin dito yung germs, yung may propensity na tutubo, yung young shoots, Siyempre, kasi lulutain naman natin, gagawin na natin cacao. Dapat, hindi na siya alive. Para bagang, hindi na siya dapat live para magkaroon ng good aroma and good taste ng ating cacao. Piniferment natin yan. Okay. In fermenting cacao, ano ang mga napoproduce natin? Nakakaproduce tayo dito ng liquid which will form vinegar and consequently wine. The product of fermentation is alcohol. So lahat ng mga nagpe-ferment nagpo-produce ng alcohol. And since fermentation is a process in which the derived product is alcohol, we can produce wine from fermentation. So paano natin ipiniferment ang beans? Often, cocoa growers ferment the beans in heaps. They choose a flat or dry spot, cover it with banana leaves, make a heap of cocoa beans, and cover the heap with banana leaves. The beans ferment well if the heap is stirred from time to time. It is much better to ferment the beans in the box or in boxes. So meron tayong mga technology, meron tayong mga pinamimigay ng Department of Agriculture, and meron tayong mga nabibili ng mga fermentation boxes which give an efficient result of fermented cacao seeds. Okay. So use this box with hole in the bottom. Place this box on support, for instance, stone. The juice runs off the box and boxes through the hole. After 2 days, the beans out of the box, stir them around well and put them into another box to make this works easier. You can stack the boxes one on top of the other. So, may mga tayo. Tingnan natin ang drawing na to. Ito yung mga fermented boxes. Okay. So these are good fermentation boxes which may be Well, it takes from 6 to 10 days. The beans are purple at the beginning and turn reddish when they are fermented. Okay. So, diyan natin ilalagay mga box na yun. Napafabricate man yan. And then, mayroon mga ipinamimigay tayo ng mga boxes. Then after fermentation, nawala na yung mga ano natin, yung kernel, nawala na yung ating mga seed coat. Madali na natin makuha yung kernel ng cacao. But it should be dry. Drying is the next step after fermentation. So when the beans are well fermented, they must be dry. Anong reason why drying? Cocoa beans may be dried in the sun or spread the beans on the board raised 1 meter above the ground. The layer of beans should not be very thick, more than 4 inches. Stir the beans often and protect them from the rain. So bakit natin ipoprotect pa rin from the rain? Kaya nga natin dinadry tapos pauulanan natin. Usually, pag ang mga binibilad natin ay nauulanan, nagkakaroon siya ng masamang amoy. And nagkakaroon siya ng tendency na tutubo. And meron siyang din na tendency na malapa. So useless ang ating pag-ferment kung hindi natin ma-dry ang beans. You cannot store the seeds properly if it is not dry. And it cannot derive a good price quality pag mayroong mga obnoxious smell which will be incurred because of not drying it properly. So, to protect from rain, you can make a little shelter, a slide of the board under the shelter every night and when it rains. This is called the sliding tree dryer. May mga may mga prefabricated na tayo ng mga drying facilities for cacao. So drying cacao beans take 5 to 10 days. In forest region where the climate is very moist, cacao beans do not dry at all well. So sa mga areas na walang masyadong maganda ang init, the cacao beans do not dry at all well. And anong epekto? Badly dried beans are of poor quality. So you get less money for them. So when the cocoa is quite dry, the beans are sorted. After the cacao has been dried, it must be sorted. Bakit natin sinusort ang mga cacao? Number 1, to remove all the flat beans, to remove germinated beans, to remove moldy beans, to remove broken beans, and keep only the good beans. Put these good beans into sacks, keep the sacks in a dry place, well protected against animal. So yan ang reason kung bakit sinusort natin. Kasi somewhere along the way, when we dry, when we remove the seeds, may mga na-destroy tayong mga beans. Ano itong mga flattened beans na to? Ito yung mga defective. At ito yung mga fruits na na-harvest natin na hindi pa hinog. Okay. Ano naman itong mga germinated beans na to? Yung mga nabasa. Yung mga hindi na dry. Okay. Ano naman yung mga moldy beans? Ito yung nabasa. At na-store natin sa madilim. Hindi siya naiilawan. Kaya may mga nagtutubo ng mga molds. Ano naman ito mga broken beans? Ito yung natin, yung na-destroy pag pukpok natin ng beans, ng pod. Or during the drying, during the fermentation, pag hinukag natin, nada-damage yung mga seeds. Ito ang mga broken beans. So all those things should be removed. Kaya sinusort natin. And keep only the good beans. Yung mga bad beans, usually, yun ang inaalis natin kasi hindi yun nabibili. Pinipili ng mga buyer natin yung mga good beans lang. Ano nang ginagawa natin sa mga gano'n, ng mga beans natin? Kung pwede pa yan i-process, pinaprocess natin for home consumption. And sometimes, tinatapon na natin kasi it will just affect the quality of your, isang good practices natin, alisin natin yung mga beans na mayroong defects, mayroong mga molds, at saka mayroong mga deteriorations. Yan ang isang good practice. So, finally, you sell the stock of cocoa. Good quality of cocoa is one which had been well harvested, well fermented, and well dried. So, yan ang good quality of cacao or cocoa. That's why we have to take consideration all these things, such as yung method of harvesting, method of extracting the seeds, and method of fermenting, and as well as drying. These are the three important indicator of a good quality of cacao. Well harvested kasi inharvest natin sa matured and ripe cacao. Well fermented because we allow it to ferment to remove the kernel, to remove the seed coat from the kernel, and maintain the aroma to ferment. And dried because we place that under the sun and remove the moisture, which will causes bad odor, which will cause deterioration, and which will cause molding, and which will cause germination of the germs. Yung mga plantlets, yung embryo pala, yung embryo. Okay. So what you see in the picture is a form of drying facility. Yung nakikita niyo parang board that can be slide under the shelter, yun ang mga sliding tray. Pwede natin gawin yun. Yung sliding tray na yan. Okay. Bakit siya ganyan? Kasi madali siyang ipasok pag tag-ulan. Ito naman ang isa, is a drying by means of fireside, is by means of stove, coke stove. Ito yung artificial drying natin. Artificial drying. Whichever is convenient to you. So I think both of these are convenient depending upon the season of the year. Kung tag-init, mas advisable na gumamit ka ng solar dryer. But if it's rainy days and you have harvested cacao and you let them dry by the use of fireside, itong sa baba ang gagamitin natin. Okay? So yan ang mga good practices that we have being adapted in order for us to gain quality dried seeds which will command high prices, good quality. So ito naman, sometimes may mga instances na mag-establish na yung cocoa farm on the forest land. Isa itong reason kung bakit may mga defects tayo sa ating cacao seeds. Kasi we established a cocoa farm on a forest land which should be avoided as far as practical as possible. Why? Kasi yung cost of transportation and then yung conflict sa ating mga wildlife, and yung conflicting land use sa protected areas. So cocoa farm plantations should not be established on an adjacent to areas identified or recognized as high conservation value habitats. Else, mayroon tayong problema dyan. We introduce nuisance, or we have been exposing ourselves to the peril because we are destroying the habitat. We are destroying the biodiversity of our plantation, the biodiversity of our forest reserves. Kasi yung cacao is a form of plantations which will open up some sort of vegetations that will destroy the habitat of some protected species. Okay, next. If rare, threatened, or endangered species or high conservative value habitats are present on cocoa farms, on plantation, or nearby, appropriate measures for management planning and operation should be implemented. So ito ang natin. Ito ang drawback. Why is it not advisable for us to establish plantation in areas which are protected? Marami tayong mga susundin na mga protocols, mayroon tayong mga regulatory measures na dapat i-attain. And in fact, one of the constraints of feasibility is your environment. The impediments which may be introduced in the area, because the feasibility of establishing plantation could be assessed in terms of its environmental impact. Kung ang impact natin will not be feasible in terms of protecting, serving, and conserving of our environment and natural resources in the protected habitats, then the valuation of our projects will jeopardize the inherent value of biodiversity, which are sometimes cannot be evaluated by the profit that we will gain from the conservation, or we will gain from establishing a plantation of cacao. So may conflict agad ng interest. So feasibility must be environmentally feasible. So yan ang isang drawback why we are prohibiting the forest from establishing. Dapat agroforestry farm, a grassland ecosystem where there is no impediment for biodiversity conservation values. Okay, so this should include ensuring that any legal requirements relating to the protection of the species or habitats are met, avoiding damage to and deterioration of applicable habitats. Ito yung mga sinasabi kong impediments or measures that should be taken into consideration. Okay, so not only of the cacao beans but also of the value of our environmental resources. So kaya ang pinaka magandang system in which a cacao could be grown is an agroforestry system, because agroforestry system is a multiple use concept whereby agricultural crops and forest crops are simultaneously produced in a single piece of land in time and space, which are compatible with the cultural management of the community. So walang no big deal dito kasi agroforestry is an integrated farm system whereby the dichotomy purpose of ecological as well as the productive and economic purpose are met in the agroforestry systems of farming. You have the long perennial crops and you have the short duration crops, such as your intercrops. And cacao is a very good base, agroforestry based plantation, agroforestry based plantation under coconut based farming system. So you will see the agroforestry system kasi can provide an excellent opportunity for the partial reforestation of degraded agricultural lands or the protection of some existing forest canopy in situation where the alternatives may be completed through complete deforestation. Though cacao agroforestry do not provide the same ecosystem services and biodiversity benefits as natural forests, they are preferable to many kinds of agricultural landscape. So ito ang reason kung bakit ina-adapt natin ang cacao farming into agroforestry farming system. It's not because I am an agroforestry enthusiast, or I belong to the department of or a program of BS Agroforestry. But the fact is that although sabi nga dito, agroforestry cannot mimic real ecosystems of the forestry, but the same ecosystem services and biodiversity benefits as the natural forest, they are preferable to many kinds of agricultural landscape. So pwede siya, fit na fit siya dito sa ating fields because it mimics the sector of agriculture and mimic the sector of forestry. Kaya nga tinatawag natin na agroforestry. The dichotomy principles of tending agriculture and forestry in one setting or in one farming areas. So what are the practices in cacao protection? Sinabi na natin kanina, disease is one of the major reasons for the loss of cocoa production in the world. Controlling it, therefore, is a key part of efficient management of cacao farm. To be able to control diseases on the farm, growers need to be able to recognize the symptom, understand the causes and the disease and how, and technical know-how, how disease organisms operate. So ito ang ano natin, ito ang kulang natin sa ating mga cacao grower. Hindi sila mga intermediate, hindi sila mga experts sa pag-identify ng pests and diseases, but they can observe how these pests and diseases affects their farm, affects the growth, affects the yield, as well as the productivity of their farm. So farmers can be a part of an applied research from where technocrats could derive information on how it can be controlled. Kasi yung ating mga technocrats ay silang may alam. The farmers are the one who devolve the information to the technocrats or to technical experts. So it's a two-way process. It's a two-way learning process whereby crop protections could be attained with the partnership of farmers in the field and with the technical expertise of the technocrats or the technical experts in the field of agriculture and forestry. Okay. Next. In controlling cacao disease, all trees should receive individual attention. As a single infected plant is likely to act as a source of infection for all other trees on the farm. Para siyang COVID, kailangan ng isang infected na trees, just like an infested COVID, dapat natin i-quarantine. So in the case of tree, it should be treated and it should be, let's say, it should be removed or removed from the farm by means of killing or by means of cutting the part which is infected and other sources and other nearby trees so that it will not spread the infection. Isa-sacrifice na natin yung mga trees na yan instead of destroying the whole plantation. If left unattended, one sick tree will eventually lead to all the others also contracting the disease. So kaya mayroon tayong mga preemptive, mayroon tayong mga quarantine, mayroon tayong sa mga plants na ating dinadala sa isang places. It's one way of protection. So here, in crop protection, there are 4 methods used to prevent diseases developing and controlling them may not become established. These methods are, number 1, regulatory, cultural, biological, and chemical. Ang pinakalas nito ang chemical. Ano ibig sabihin ng regulatory? Pag sinabing regulatory, we adhere to the rule. We adhere to the standards. Kasi yung good practices natin is a form of regulatory. Yung cultural is a form of practices which entails the traditional practices of preventing pests and diseases, or by culturing quality planting materials or superior genetic materials is a form of cultural practices. Then a form of biological by introducing organisms which will counterpart or counterattack the infecting diseases we have in the farm is a biological control. And ang pinakalas natin na method is yung chemical. Pag ito severe, pag ito unending, and it will have this what we call pandemic situation. Chemical na ang gagamitin natin sa ating mga plantation, sa ating mga cacao, no? So these methods, ang pinakamaganda rito is regulatory, ano? Follow the good agriculture practices. Because good agricultural practices follows a standard, which are based on the use of several criteria, including the environment, including the health, as well as the welfare of our constituents. Next. Now let's go to harvesting. Malapit na tayo. Harvesting, post-harvest. Ano naman ang mga practices natin for harvesting and post-harvest of cacao on farm, processing and storage? Malapit na tayo. Harvesting pods should be harvested as soon as they arrive. Ito ang pinakamagandang rule, ano. Huwag na natin i-delay. Because pag ang mga fruit trees ay hindi natin i-harvest as soon as they arrive, dalawa lang ang mangyayari dito. It's either maunahan tayo mag-harvest or mawawala ang ating harvest by pest and diseases. Na? Malalaglag yan sa lupa and then magiging siyang wilding in the future. Maray ko maging wilding. Paano kung kinain ng mga wild animals in the forest or wild animal in the environment? Okay. So harvesting should be done every 2 weeks if there are not many ripe pods, and every week during peak period. Kasi ang mga cacao, hindi naman yan sabay-sabay natin ina-harvest. Hindi naman natin sinasabay yan. Hindi naman yan namumunga gaya ng palay na ina-harvest natin in just one setting. Pauna-una, paano yan, kasunod-sunod. Okay? So generally, kung ganyan ang situation natin, followin natin yung nire-require na interval, then we could have a good and efficient harvest at a time. Okay. Hindi tayo mawawala. Hindi tayo mababawasan ng yield in that particular case. Kasi mayroon tayong condition na pods should be harvested as soon as they arrive. It is in this reason why our farmers, small farmers, cannot obtain a very high yield kasi pa isa-isa, padikit-dikit. Pero kung malaki ang plantation mo, malaki man ang harvest mo at a certain interval. Okay. Kaya nangyayari, dahil sa ganon, konti ang na-harvest for every week, namumugtak lang sa ginagawang tsokolate for food. Anyway, likewise, it is important to do separate round of farm energy week to remove sick pods and charrels with cocoa hook that is used only for removing diseased material. So, mayroon tayong cleaning time or sanitation harvesting. Ang inaalis natin yung mga pods which are diseased. Okay. So it is also essential that the pods do not become overripe as they are more likely to become infected with diseases. Yun ang sinasabi ko kasabago, And the beans inside overripe pods will germinate. Minsan makikita natin na tumutubo na yung cacao doon sa pods dahil napatagal natin ang kanyang pag-harvest. Napaka highly mataas ang germinative energy ng isang cacao pag siya ay which is being left in the mother trees. Okay? So evidence today suggests that ochratoxin A producing organism enter the cocoa supply chain via damaged pod. So to reduce ochratoxin A in the cocoa supply chain, it is recommended that farmers do not wound pods with a machete. So ito yung pinakita natin kasubago na dapat ang pag-harvest natin, wag natin i-open ang pads, wag natin i-injure ang pads. Kasi doon ang avenue. Yung wounded pads of any kind should be stored for any longer than 1 day. So kung may mga ganon, hindi natin hahayaan ang mga pads na yan be stored with other pads na hindi injure. Otherwise, maapektuhan natin ng ibang mga pinag-harvest natin na pads na walang damage. No? Kaya, pag-harvest, maingat. Okay. Anong implications if we harvest pads which are unripe? Paano daw ang epekto kung mag-harvest tayo ng mga pads na hindi siya hinog? Number one, wala naman palang number. It is equally important not to harvest unripe pads because the beans inside unripe pads will not be ready for fermenting. Yun, hindi pala pwede mag-ferment ang ating mga beans pag hindi pa siya hinog. So useless, hindi masarap. Kasi ang purpose ng fermentation is to highlight the flavor of cacao in order to release the real chemical compounds found in your pads. No, not pads, in your seeds. So unripe beans are hard without mucilage and will be neither separate easily nor ferment properly. So hard. Pero kung hinog na siya, di ba ang hinog, mas madali siyang mapisa. Pero yung mga young, matagas. Ano? And you experience this in real sense. Ano? Especially yung mga practitioner natin na expert na talaga sa pag-ano. I think everybody will agree with me. Beans from unripe pads must not be included in the wet beans for fermentation. Wag daw natin ihalo yung mga na-harvest natin na unripe pads with the wheat beans fermentation. Why? Kasi since those pads are not well matured and it will not be suited for fermentation, mahahaluan yung mga magagandang beans na mga unfermented. So as if halfway lang tayo na-attain natin yung aroma o yung halfway yung quality ng matured beans na dapat natin i-harvest. Nahahaluan ng hindi tamang beans. So, good beans plus bad beans equals bad beans. Ano? Kasi halfway naapektuhan yung good beans. Ano? It is not the good beans that dominates with good beans. Kasi makikita natin yan. Mas masamang influence ng masama sa good. Ano? In terms of food. Ano? Konting diferensya sa ating pagkain, konting diferensya sa ating aroma, napaka-sensitive ng ating organoleptic sensory. No? Konting anta lang sa ating mga foods, konting amoy lang sa ating pagkain. Our sensory organoleptic taste will be affected. Ano? Ganyan ang pagkain. Okay. Farmers should always use a sharp cocoa hook or a stick. Scature can be used to harvest pod within inches stretch. Yan ang isang mga ano natin. Distils should be kept clean. They should not be used for removing diseases pods. If a grower only has one long handle cocoa hook, it is essential that it be disinfected after use in this or this is pads. A bush knife should not be used. Yan ang mga ano. Minsan ang mga ginagamit ng tools nagiging source ng ating mga contaminations. So kailangan natin i-disinfect ang ating mga tools before and after using because it will affect our product. Then pad breaking. Ito, pad breaking. Pad breaking should be conducted at an appropriate manner to avoid damage and contamination of the beans. Okay. Anong ibig sabihin ng proper manner? Huwag natin pupukpukin ng bato ng mga madudumi. Huwag natin pupukpukin ng mga object na fun. So dapat clean. Dapat mayroon tayong pamukpok nito na constant na ginagamit natin. Once a sufficiently large quantity of pads has been harvested, the pads must be broken and the beans is extracted. Ito ang ibig sabihin niya. Pag nakakuha na tayo ng maraming quantity of pads, dapat buksan kaagad natin. Alisin kaagad natin doon sa pads kasi iiwasan natin na tutubo. Ipa-ferment kaagad natin with seeds that are matured in the box. So it is best to do this straight away or within a couple of days after harvesting in order to avoid losses from diseases. So pad breaking, yun ang suggestion. Huwag na natin gawing 2 araw. So pagka-harvest natin, automatic, kung possible, in the afternoon, pag-harvest natin, in the morning, in the afternoon, we begin to break the pads para mas mauna nating makuha yung mga seeds kesa makuha ng mga diseases. Now, fermentation. So ito na yung process na kung saan ang seeds natin ay ina-allow na mag-break. Na-discuss na natin yan. So it is recommended or preferable to conduct the fermentation process in the heap of banana plantains. So ulit na lang ito. So the wheat beans are poured into the boxes or plantain leaves in turn once a day. So kailangan ng pagpe-ferment natin, araw-araw natin ginagalaw. Hindi natin ina-allow na mag-stay kasi the process of turning is important as it ensures the even heating of the beans. So para evenly distributed ang pag-heat ng mga beans. Allow air to enter the ferment, break up any lumps, and prevent the formation of molds in the beans. So yan ang reason kung bakit natin kailangan ginagalaw ang ating mga, parang hinuhukay natin. Kung pag nagkita ng paroy, ginagalaw natin ang mga seeds para evenly ang pagka-dry. Ito naman, sa fermentation, kailangan natin iikutin ang mga beans, babalik rin natin, gagalawin natin, para evenly distributed ang fermentation effect nito sa beans. Wag yung nagkaroon tayo ng iba-ibang fermentation results. Okay. The causes of excessive acid which reduce cocoa flavor development. Pag hindi daw natin galaw ang ating mga piniferment na cacao seeds, it will stimulate the proliferation of acetobacter and the production of the more acetic acid. Anong ibig sabihin niya? Pag medyo maasim ang ating mga seeds, hindi masarap ang resultant ng tableya. Okay. Maanta-anta ang tableya. So the length of fermentation process is usually 5 to 7 days. So 7 days lang ang pinakamataas. Then drying. Drying. The effect of fermentation. After fermentation, the cocoa beans must be dry. If the effect of drying, if the drying is not started immediately, the cocoa beans will keep fermenting in rot. magkakaroon ng kulay itim, malalapa pag hindi na tinutunan. Subalit, kung may excessive drying naman, will result in components that are brittle and break easily, causing a high proportion of waste. Pag ang kakao naman daw na dry natin ng sobrang drying, napaka-brittle na ng seeds. That's why it resulted to breakage and wastes. And it does not have a good quality pag sobrahan naman natin ng dry. So, incorrect drying can lead off flavor. While incorrect sun drying that is too slow due to the lack of sunlight can cause mold contamination. So, musty, hammy flavors can arise if the drying takes too long. Incorrect artificial drying with poorly maintained dryers will cause smoke contamination. Okay. Care should be taken to ensure that only well-functioning and maintained dryers which do not allow direct sunlight of the beans with smoke are used in order to reduce or eliminate smoke contamination. Ito yung mga instances na because of yung mga smoke natin, although smoke is a form of prevention, apektado ang apektado ang aroma ng ating seeds kung yan ay niloto sa cook stove na kahoy, no? Yan ang epekto ng yung mga smoke na stove, cook stove na may ng smoke. It eliminates the aroma or it retains the smoke aroma in the beans. Hindi maganda. Those are incorrect drying. Usually nangyayari ito doon sa artificial drying kung ginagamitan natin. Pero pag sunlight drying, napaka taas ng quality ng sun drying kaysa doon sa artificial drying. Okay? Now, the last stage of processing is yung packaging and storaging. Ito na yung kung saan ang cacao ay being packaged in clean bag which are sufficiently strong and properly sealed. Ito na yung marketable component ng ating cacao. The bag should be made of non-toxic materials, preferably food-grade hydrocarbon-free bags that do not attract insects and rodents and are sufficiently strong to resist storage for a longer period of time. So yung packaging materials natin is a very good marketing practice that will ensure that our product are being stored in a right manner, and it also commands high prices for it. Packaging pa lang, it's already a good practice in us. So kaya lang, paano natin ma-ensure ang good packaging if at the beginning hindi natin nasunod ang good practices? So that's it. Packaging and storaging is a one-way ticket to the market. Minsan sa packaging and storage, nakaka-deceive ito ng customers. Packaging and storage deceive customers. But it should not be done. It should not be the case. Packaging should be the end output of our quality production process among our products. Hindi natin gawing camouflage ang packaging and storage to deceive our customers that indeed our product is good kahit hindi. Although ganyan ang practice ng ating mga ibang factory, mga manufacturer. Ang ganda-ganda ng package pero ang laman
Nagkuran kayo ang subanggit. Tapos maaraman, nagtrabaho sa iba.
Okay. Then another is, ito yung ang last portion natin. The good agricultural practices for cacao adheres to the quality control. So quality control, using the appropriate equipment, moisture meter knives for cut tests, weighing machine, etc. and other mga props natin The quality of the cacao beans in the bags must be checked before the cacao is sold. Ano? Ito yung quality control natin. Sometimes, hindi natin ito tinitake for granted kasi yung mga market natin is local. Local din ang mga products natin. In Belgium, in other parts of the world, the best practice that traders or that trader, processor, and the producer is adherence to the control, the quality control. Pag hindi ka papasa sa quality control, hindi lalabas ang yung product mo. Pero sa atin, sa mga local producer natin, ito ang isang dilemma natin. Sometimes inahalo natin yung mga pangit doon sa magaganda para mabili ang ating product. Kaya nga sabi ko nga, may deceit sa packaging. Ito isang way of not adhering to the quality control is when we deceive our traders, consumers as well as the traders. Dinideceive na mga packaging natin yung quality na nasa loob ng ating product. Ang ibig kong sabihin, ang ganda-ganda ng packaging natin pero ang laman tunsoy, no? Ang ganda-ganda ng packaging natin, ang ganda-ganda ng cover natin pero ang laman sangkaka. So, ganun ang pan natin, ganun ang mga values natin. So, quality control means the value or virtue of adhering to the principle of quality, adhering to the regulatory body which will not deceive our customers. No. So kailangan natin itong padaanan ng ating control, hindi yung palusot. This process is a crucial one, and as it considerably affect the final price paid to the farmers. Kaya minsan pag nag-discover tayo na na ganyan ang mga packaging natin, yung mga good quality may halo na mga pangit. After several times na nag-deliver ka, it was found na hindi pala of good quality. Na-deceive lang natin sa packaging ang ating mga buyers or ang ating mga consumers. Wow, wala ka na sa market. You will lose your customers. Diba? Sabi natin fermented. Tapos ito pala, hindi. Sinupsupan lang pala ng mga bata yung cacao. Yun ang fermentation. Tapos i-drenay. May mikrobyo pa. Package doon yung mikrobyo. See? Yan ang mga natin. Yan ang mga sometimes hindi natin tinitingnan yung ganyong hygienes or good manufacturing practices. So at this stage, the cacao beans must fulfill certain criteria agreed in the contract. So anong mga contract na yan para ma-adhere natin ng quality control? Number 1, the cocoa must be properly fermented and dried. Hindi sinupsupan hindi pinagtagaran sa mga akin na magsupsop yung mga seeds tapos ita-dry na natin. Yun na yun. Fermentation in a box, in a banana, or whatsoever, kung ano man ang media. Okay? Yun ang mga practices ng mga natin. In fact, may nagsabi, paano ninyo in-extract ang cacao? Kaya kami nga kanto, binabayaran nga kami ng 50 tapos magparasop-sop lang nga kami ng cacao maghapon. So yun ang process of extracting seeds. Sa totoo lang, meron ganyan. The cocoa must be free from any foreign odors. So yan, yung quality, foreign odors. Ano ang foreign odors? Parang ng Iranian. O parang nang hindi naliligo. Foreign odors. O kaya, parang na maanta. Parang na medyo mabantot. So mga foreign odors yan. Yung obnoxious smell that annoys our senses. Then the beans must comply with the limits in contents of slaty, flat, double, broken, moldy, insect damage, foreign matters, and germinated beans. Ito yung mga hindi dapat isasama doon sa packaging. Slaty, yung medyo nakumi. Yung medyo may mga butas. Slate, may mga butas-butas kasi natusok ng bukbok. Then flat kasi hindi hinog. Then double kasi nagdukutan. Then broken kasi napukpok. Moldy kasi mayroong mga molds na naiwan doon sa madilim na portion na may basa-basa kaya nagkaroon ng kulay discoloration, may itim, may molds. And then may insect damage. Ano mga insect damage na yan? Kino. And then hindi pala insect ang kino, yung mga moth, yung mga larva. Then foreign matters. Ano mga foreign matters? May baybay, may sand, may bato. Pag dry kasi, may bato. Tapos yung yung cacao pinag-dry doon sa banig. Tapos pinag-naunawa ng pato sa kamanok. At saka nag-kill pa sa ayam duman sa sa banig. So yan ang mga foreign matters. Parang natong dinadry ang natong sa ibabaw ng pansyon. Tapos yung mga ayam, nagdadaralagan doon, may mga balahibo. Tapos, lulutoon ng Bicol Express siram. So, yan ang mga hindi dapat doon sa quality control. The cocoa must conform to the required moisture level. No? And there, pag sinabi ng the cocoa must conform to the required moisture level, it should be zero, not zero, it should be 10 to 30% moisture content. The oven dry condition. Oven dry condition. Okay. Kasi even the driest cacao, meron pa yan moisture. So pwedeng mga 10 to 20% moisture is enough. Hindi naman yan totally zero moisture, or else na yan, crack na yan. There have to be a number of cocoa beans per unit weight of 100 or 1,000 grams. So, ibig sabihin nito there are a number of cocoa beans per unit weight of 100 grams or 1,000 grams. Okay. Meron siyang standard weights na 100 or 1,000 grams per unit weight. Ibig sabihin nito yung density, the weight per unit volume of the substance, density. Parang bang arab kayo ni, kadaradakula pero mababa ang weight. Kasadit-sadit pero mabigat. Density yon, ang measure natin doon. So, sabi nga natin kanina, yung variety ng Criollo, kahit maliit pero masarap, mabigat. Hindi yung malaki pero walang laman, hindi masarap. Diba, Sir Bloody? Pag maliit, basta mataas ang density, masarap. Pero pag hindi, pag malaki pero walang laman, walang bigat, hindi maganda. So wala tayo sa control na yan. So density ang pinag-usapan natin dito. Kaya yung mga flat, yung mga slaty, mga products na yan, mababa ang density niya kaya it doesn't command high prices for that. Okay, quality control. While under the present of circumstances, quality control is mostly carried out by the official from cooperative buyers, it is highly desirable that in the context of sustainable and modern cocoa production and marketing, farmers would play a larger role in the marketing of their cocoa. So it is the farmer who would play a larger role in the marketing of cocoa, not the traders. Para ba yung palay, Kaya minsan, hindi nagbo-bloom ang ating mga farmer because of this situation. In this situation. Kung sino ang mga nagpo-produce sa field, yun ang mababa ang equitable share. So maling situation yan. So eventually, At saka ang masaklap pa nito ganito, ano, yung mga buyer ang nagdi-dictate quality. Of course, kasi sila ang may pera. Ano? So, yan ang ibig sabihin na under the present circumstances, yung mga mapipera, yung mga trader, yun ang nagsiset ng quality. Yun ang nagsiset ng standard. Oo, kasi sila ang may pera. So ngayon, our farmers should adhere to that quality. Ngayon, ang ibig kong sabihin, if you adhere to a very high quality, you can also command a high price. Ito ang quality namin. You also buy that in a very high cost. Yan ang gusto niyo. Hindi naman ang gusto namin. So ang implication nito is that farmers should improve the quality of the products so that they could command the high prices. No? Hindi yung mga traders ang nagsiset ng quality. So sabi dito, farmers would play a larger role in the marketing of their cocoa. Anong ibig sabihin niyan? Kayo ang maging susundin. Kasi kayo ang nagdi-dictate ng quality. Kayo ang magsiset ng quality na gusto nyo. Kasi pag hindi at saka fault din naman talaga yun ng farmers eh. Kasi hindi kayo nagsunod sa quality, kaya mapipilitan kang ibigay ang presyo doon sa gusto ng iyong traders. Kasi hindi ka nag-adhere sa quality. But if you adhere to the quality more than expected of the farmer, then the product would come at a high price. Kasi hoda na na ikaw lang ang bibili. Kami na mag-process nito and we can be equitable in our senses. Kaya yung co-op dapat is a very strong advocacy of the quality control. And eventually, they should take over the quality control and carry out farm level before selling the cocoa beans, thus taking more responsibility for the quality of the cocoa, enabling them to command higher prices. Yun ang sinasabi ko. They should take care of the quality control and carry out the farm level. Sa farm pa lang, may quality na. Sa farm pa lang may quality na. Huwag na nating paabutin doon na pag-packaging na, kayo na ang mag-pray na, uy, bilhin mo ang product ko kasi because substandard ang iyong ginawa. So dapat sa farm pa lang, that's why yung natin good agricultural practices starts from selecting the site, selecting the seeds variety, and selecting the packaging up to the processed foods, up to the time of marketing. Yun ang chain ng ating good agricultural practices. From soil to market, from farm to table, from farm to dining table. Yun ang gustong sabihin ng ating quality control. So in such approach of closer involvement of farmers in cocoa production and marketing process, their current important issues such as traceability could also be assessed. So yan. Ang pinakalas dito na hindi na natin na-discuss is yung recording system as a quality. Recording system or data management information is a very important agricultural practices. Why? Because it provides the data, it provides the source, and it provides information which will be used for enhancement, for improvement, as well as for prosecution and insurance, as well as other form of relief in case of inadherence to the good agricultural practices. Okay? So I think I have substantiatedly come up with a very lengthy but boring discussion about cacao. So wake up now and have a question and I'll entertain your question. Sorry for boring you, huh? Pero that's a good input.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liesol, for that very insightful discussion.
Thank you also.
In fact, we are already receiving, sir, a bunch of questions right now. So,
Patay.
opo. But before we proceed po to our open forum, may we remind the participants that we will acknowledge you first. We will acknowledge or recognize your question if you will raise your hand po. Paki-press po noong reaction natin. Mamaya, uunahin po muna natin yung mga isinulat naming tanong mula sa ating chat box at sa ating Facebook Live. Na po, so... Pwede na po ba tayong magsimula, sir? Meron na po akong lista ng mga tanong po natin mula sa chat box at sa Facebook Live po.
Kaya ko bang sagutin?
May mga chat ba? Oo, yan.
Si Mr. Rompilio. Sir, hello.
I love you. I love you, sir.
I
Yeah.
miss you.
Sir,
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Lizol, excuse po.
Huwag mo lang akong pahirapan.
Meron ako
Dr.
rito
Lizol,
kasama.
excuse po, sir.
Yes, hello.
Excuse me lang po. Pwede po, sir, pa-stop na po ng pag-share screen nyo.
Okay, sige. Paano ba ito isi-stop? Jobal. Sige. Pa-stop na daw ng sharing.
Yung ano.
Thank you, sir, para po makita natin yung mga participants po na naka-raise ng hands. Okay po. So, meron po tayo, sir, ditong tanong. Ang sabi po from Raimundo Santos, do you promote use seed rather than grafted seedlings?
As I have said
Do you
before,
promote used seed rather than grafted seedlings?
yeah, I promote seed more than any form because first, seed is very conventional, very easy, and could be derived from a good plantation. But grafting of cacao doesn't show success, and it could be costly in terms of time, in terms of space, because you cannot supplement wide plantation from a grafting process. Ang grafting kasi konti-konti yan. Hindi ka makakapag-produce ng thousands of scions and rootstock for cacao. At saka, it was proven na hindi masyadong promising ang grafting ng cacao. So, seeds pa rin ang pinaka-effective.
Okay po. Meron pa po tayo, sir. Ano po kaya ang mga effective na gawin sa cacao na may disease po katulad ng black pod po? According po yan kay Edmar Candelario.
As I have said, diseases is the hardest form of problems affecting our cacao. Second yun sa pagyo. So if we have cacao that at early stage of symptom, kailangan ating i-eradicate ang symptom. Kung iyan ay branch pa lang, alisin ka agad natin ng branch. So kung isa pa lang, kaya ang the best way is by preventing such diseases by monitoring. You take your plantation as your husband. Titingnan mo pag may piklat ang asawa mo, kailangan tingnan mo agad para din kung hindi mo tinitingnan ang mga damage ng asawa mo. Yun. Kailangan ang pagpa-farm ng cacao para din your loved one. Tingnan mo. I-monitor mo regularly para makita mo ang mga changes sa iyong farm. So at the onset of starting the initiation of the symptom, patayin mo agad. Kill the source agad. Or i-eradicate mo kaagad yung part na affected. Para ma-prevent. So prevention is more than just eradication. Prevention means monitoring properly. Or clean the site. Ang the best way is clean the site, free the sites from weeds and other pathogens by introducing biological control or by monitoring it properly. Okay?
Okay po, sir. We have another po from Maria Luz Manalo. is there an agency po ba na pwedeng mag-check if the soil in the farm is good for cacao planting?
Yes, we have. We have the Bureau of Soils. And we have here in the CBSUA, you can go to CBSUA, bring your sample, and we will analyze that in our laboratory using our testing kit. We have here Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major in Soil Science major. May mga chemist tayo dito sa laboratory. We can test your plant. We're an agency advocating for the soil analysis. Pero if you have cost, if you have so much money, you can go to Bureau of Soils Laboratory. Complete soil analysis will cost you 10,000 pesos. But here in CBSU, you just only have your pamasahe. We can analyze your soil.
Okay po, sir. Thank you po. Meron pa po, sir, according kay Sir Raimundo Santos. Sir, does this pruning system based on seedling, is this the new cacao gap as identified by DA in the Cacao Industry Roadmap 2022 Challenge?
Pwede expound anong ibig sabihin ng tanong na yan? Kung yan ay what? Ano natin? Pakiulit na lang. Kasi hindi ko
sige po, sir. Ang tanong niya po, sir, does this pruning system based on seedling, is this the new cacao gap as identified by DA in the Cacao Industry Roadmap 2022 Challenge?
Probably, because pruning is a traditional system of cropping and good agricultural practices. Pruning is already been proven to be one of the most important cultural practices that will enhance the growth and productivity of your cacao plantation. So it's one of the roadmap to include that as a good practices procedure.
Okay po, sir. Another po kay Ron Atable. How many months from replanting can we start pruning?
It says that in a span of 1 year, when the flowering starts in 2 years, but in a span of 1 year, you can also start making pruning activities. But the best way to prune is when the onset of flowering, phenological attributes of the plant started. Ipoprune mo kaagad yung unang flower kasi it will not give you the best cacao pods as it started. So kailangan yung pangalawang portion o pangalawang cycle ng kanyang phenological attributes will be used in order to have a better cacao yield. So magsa-start ka na ng pruning. Wala pa mo ng pruning ng 1 year. But 2 years, pwede na. Kasi pag 2 years pa lang, kung healthy ang iyong plants at fertile ang iyong soils, nag-onset na kagad ang phenological attributes ng cacao. Namumulaklak na agad. Doon ka na magpuprune. Anong ipoprune mo? Yung mga sanga na nagpo-produce ng flower. Kasi wala naman yung silbi. It will not produce you a good pods. So 2 years, to be exact. Yan ang pinakaunang onset of pruning. Pag namumulaklak na.
Okay po, sir. Meron pa po tayo from Tricia Ignilan. Sir, may cultural prevention po ba para makontrol ang pests tsaka mga diseases? Kasi parang ang mahal po ng chemicals.
Of course. The first, as I have said, is hygiene, cleaning. Pag ang iyong site is clean, pag ang iyong site is well cared, well prevented, walang mga pathogens, and walang introduction of unquarantined plants, yun ang prevention natin. The best way is to select a good quality of planting materials, fertile soils, and of course, available water. Because water is the best medicine of all plantation. It reacts chemical from the from the soils and other nutrients that are being leached from the forest land to the farm.
Okay
So,
po,
para
sir.
i-equate natin yan sa bahay. Ano? Pag ang bahay mo is fully equipped with preventive measures such as good housing, good cleaning, and good food, good nutrition, and of course, proper loving care, happiness will follow and no diseases will suffer.
Yes, sir. Galing pa po ito kay Ma'am Tricia. Sa amin po, sir, kinakain namin ang laman ng seeds tapos hinuhugasan ko. Tama po ba itong practice?
Hindi. Kasi may mikrobyo pa rin yan. Ano? Pero siguro, actually, tradition yan natin. Ano? Hindi siya good hygienic, hindi siya good practice. Ano? So, nasabi ko nga, na ngayon, mayroon na tayong fermentation process in which the seeds are being fermented right after removing from the pods. Noon kasi, yung mga ninuno natin, pinapasupsupan talaga yan. Kinakain talaga ang kakao. Kasi masarap din naman talaga kain ang kakao. Pero under the concept of good practices, hindi siya. Kasi mayroon na tayong good hygienic processes. Sinusupsupan ng ibang tao tapos hugasan natin. Nandoon pa rin yung Hindi naman pwedeng sabunin yung cacao seeds para mawala yung mikrobyo. Mas lalong hindi natin pwedeng i-treat ng alcohol o kaya ano pa man ng mga chemicals para mawala yung mikrobyo. Okay? So hindi tama lang siguro kung sa atin lang kakainin lang natin. Pero kung i-market natin, if we put our products in the market, kailangan we will follow the good agriculture practices. Okay ba?
Okay po, sir. Thank you po. Ito naman pong question na ito, sir, is from our friends from Indonesia to Sir Leonardo Regino. Ang tanong niya po, do Philippines have a technique to get a fine flavor on doing processing and drying cocoa beans?
In Davao City, we already had. We had already been having a state-of-the-art cacao processing, tablea. But in some part of the country, we are still handicapped. Many of our cocoa processor and trader resorting to their traditional manual cacao processing. But with the help of Blair Belgium, our small-scale household cacao farmers and traders are being capacitated in order to have a state-of-the-art cocoa production and quality product, which will be equitable to the quality of markets, quality of cacao or cocoa products in Belgium and other forms of producing chocolate-producing countries. I hope so. We have. After the Belgium government will fully provide us with the equipment of processing high-quality cacao. So this time, napaka-handicap pa ng ating small-scale producer. But in effect, we are towing that line.
Okay po, sir. Meron pa po tayong isa, sir. Sir, paano po malalaman pag enough na ang dryness ng seeds para maiwasan po ang under at over dry ng seeds?
Unang parameter natin, sabi natin, drying will last for 7 days, 7 to 10 days. So, yan, assured na tayo. Pag napakaganda ng sun drying natin and yung fermentation natin. Another thing, kung ang ay mayroon tayong mga tester ng moisture meter sa mga beans, pag nag-reach siya ng 20 to 25% moisture, dry na po yung ating mga seeds. Mayroon tayong mga moisture meter dyan. Kaya may mga tools tayo. So may moisture content na 25%.
Okay po, sir. So far po, sir, yun lang po yung nailista namin mga tanong. Pero po sa mga participants natin, kung magbibigay po kami ng 5 slots sa nais pa pong magtanong, magtaas lang po kayo, mag-raise po kayo ng hand at magpakilala po kayo bago niyo po sabihin yung inyong tanong. Sa participants po ba natin, meron pa pong gustong magtanong? Or meron pa po kayong tanong?
Ma'am,
Sino po yun?
open. Okay. Naka-open na.
Magpakilala po kayo kung kayo pa ay magtatanong bago po kayo magsalita. Sir Raul Yansana, tama po ba kami, sir? Okay po.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. Doon ay tatanong ko lang po, sir. By the way, I'm Bishop third year na ako dyan sa Sibiswa right now, as of today. But meron po ako itatanong sana, sir. Regarding po doon sa, if we have a existing cacao tree, which part of the fruit of the cacao, sir, ang pwede kong pagkunan ng seedlings? Is it from the sa stage katong cacao or doon mismo sa tree, sa mga ano niya? Or nasa lower part or yung nasa taas?
Ang alin po, ang tinatanong yung tree o yung seeds, yung pod?
Itong bunga po ba, sir? Which rin po doon ang mas magandang ipangtanim, itong sa lower part niya kukunin o yung nasa taas?
Sir, yung sa gitna. Yung sa gitna po. Yung sa gitna. Alisin mo yung sa dulo at saka yung sa dulo sa baba. Yung sa gitna po. Kasi yun ang pinaka-balance na yung sa taas kasi parang ano na yun, deform sa taas. Diba kulang na siya ng deformity pa lang. Pero yung sa gitna, perfect pang pagka-align. Para din yan ipil-ipil, sir. Yung sa dulo ng ipil-ipil, pangit. Yung sa baba naman pangit. Yung sa gitna ang maganda. Diba? Yung sa gitna. Para lang yung papaya. Sir, pag sa taas kasi, nagiging lalaki yung mga doon sa dulo. Sa baba naman, masyadong hindi maganda. Pero yung sa gitna, yun ang magandang lahi ng seeds. Kaya natin sinusort ang mga beans pag natin na-dry na, pag ipinapackage na natin. Kaya mayroon tayong kahit isang pods yan, mayroong maliit, mayroong malaki. Kasi mayroong may dulo, mayroon doon sa beginning. Ang pinakamagandang plantain materials natin, yung sa gitna. Nasagot ko, sir.
I heard correct, sir, na parehas din pala, sir, sa papaya, sir. Yung sinabi.
Oo.
Kailangan sa gitna ka nung papaya kukuha ng mga seedlings.
So, lahat naman ng seeds ganun.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you po, Sir Raul, for that question. Thank you, sir, for...
Nababasa mo talaga.
meron pa pong nakataas yung kamay kay Sir Raimundo Santos. Pwede pong magpakilala muna kayo, sir, bago po bigayan yung tanong.
Abo mo man talaga kung isipon.
So, good afternoon po. I'm Raimundo Santos. I'm actually with Verdad Cooperative. I just want to ask, sir, yung tungkol sa cacao, I know now the Philippine Cacao Industry Council is reviewing the roadmap. The important aspect of that is yung cacao gap. So I was asking tungkol sa source of seedling. Kasi pinaka-importante dyan, yung accredited PPI NSIC is based on grafted cacao. I just want to have your comment regarding seedling. But how many percentage or what is our target